Good morning, everyone. This is another 50 Acres Academy webinar. So welcome to any of you who have joined us before, and a special welcome to anyone who is joining us for the first time. We do these webinars periodically, usually every month or two. It's essentially as a sort of information sharing amongst the not-for-profit space in particular, but obviously they're welcome to anyone to attend. If one of my staff just said that you can hear a bit of banging in the background, it's my fireplace, so apologies if you hear something banging, that's what the noise is. If you hear a dog barking in the background, it's a dog out there who objects to not being let out right at this stage, but would be a bit more noisy if he was outside. So thanks so much again for joining. Today's webinar is about how to create a voice for your organisation's blog. And we'll be going through some tactics in terms of being able to work through, how to make that. So I'm just getting on to the next page. How to make that work for you, and it really depends on what stage you're up to in terms of your organisation and whether you've got a blog, whether you're thinking about putting one into place. So we'll be going through some of the practicalities of how to make that work. So essentially, what we're hoping to do and achieve today, and, of course, just jump in if you've got questions, please put a question in the question box that you've got there at any stage, and I'll respond to those as we go. But, really in terms of, people are at different stages, whether you've got a fully functional blog or you're just starting out, hopefully what we'll be able to achieve today is, talk about and show you the power of blogging and how it can be used to your advantage, covering the areas of keyword searches, blog setups, content promotion and analytics. Obviously, the objective is to get new followers and supporters and increase engagement through your organisation through blogging as the tool. So what we're going to cover today is why is blogging important? How does it translate into engagement, which is obviously one of the important drivers for an organisation or a not-for-profit? How do you get started? And happy to answer questions as we go along the way. So just jump in and ask anything you like as we go. So, as we all know, why blog? People often ask me when I'm giving a workshop or a seminar, why blog? Is blogging important? What is a blog? And you already probably share content in other ways. You probably use different platforms. Depending on how your website's configured, you might have various sections of the website that are dedicated to, various content that revolves and changes and evolves. So it's not static. A blog is really effectively, an updated, iterative flow of information that doesn't remain the same. So obviously you're probably updating your website all the time, but a blog allows you to have current, updated content that will engage people and bring them back to you. Essentially, that's what it is. I've just got a question here from Miranda. Why a blogging as opposed to a more conventional newsletter forum? It's a good question. I mean, as we all know, there is lots and lots of ways of communicating with people, and I often say to people, do what you can resource. It's probably very unlikely that your organisation is going to be able to resource Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, a fully functioning website that's got lots of updates, a newsletter, plus events. I mean, there's just so much to do. So you sometimes need to make decisions about how you use your resources. But effectively, a newsletter and a blog is the same thing, and you can use the content in the same way. So for people that that respond to getting content delivered into their inboxes, it's a fantastic delivery method. There's no reason why you can't use that content. Also, repurpose it on your website in a blog, which is, an updated, non-static form of information sharing effectively. But as I say here in this slide, people are, and as you know yourself, what's the first thing that all of you do when you get up or wake up in the morning? You probably reach for your phone. I think the statistic I saw last week was 75% of people have their phone next to their bed, and it's the first thing they do before they get out of bed, is reach for your phone. So, it's much more a driver these days, constant attachment to your device, accessing information through that device. So, as well as websites. So, there is a whole myriad of ways you can communicate with people, and a blog is one of those. So if people are on constant search for information, a blog is one way of getting it to them. And of course you can repurpose other information and other content, but it's just one, I think, useful way of doing it. So, if you're wanting your organisation in front of more people and more eyes, the key is really to consistently produce some really great content that will grab the attention of those people that you're wanting to grab, and to captivate them, to get them to come back to you, because you all probably go on lots of journeys, as we all do, with online research, and just when you're time wasting, and who of you haven't done that? We all do it every day, but you're out there, you're looking at blogs. I mean, I follow a lot of food blogs, which I love, and I have them in an RSS feeder, and I look at them when I've got some downtime. And it's a great way of sort of zonking out for a bit on the couch. Other people, that's just what I do in my spare time. People look at your blog and get their information at different times of the day, and it's no longer bunking off. Being online in an office environment, or at work, or at home, is no longer bunking off. It's part of what we do, and so I think it is sort of imperative for all of us to think about how we're going to do that. So one of the things we're going to talk about is making sure that your blog is integrated into your website, particularly if you've got an organisation website. Having it integrated alongside that means that you're not going to lose anyone along the way. They don't have to go out, click through to another website, and then come back to you. So I think having it, co-located on your site is very important. Obviously, the blog has the potential to be a really high converting engagement tool, and we'll get to what some of those might be in a minute. But there is all sorts of options for engaging people, and it's important that we convert them to get them to do what we want them to do. And whether that's giving you more money, subscribing to your newsletter, whatever that is, you need to have a focus on getting them to do that. So, why are we doing it? What's the whole rationale of doing the blog? There's a couple of reasons. It not just is a driver for engagement and potentially to monetize those contacts. So, exciting them, empowering them, getting them to connect in an emotional way with what you're doing as an organisation, so that they then are committed to going and giving you money, or getting involved with your cause, or signing up to do something for you. So obviously it's a tool to trigger those emotional responses. But it's more than that. It's about enhancing your knowledge and your reputation in the marketplace. And there's a lot of not-for-profits out there. We all know the statistics. There's hundreds of thousands of them in Australia, small and large, all really in many respects competing for the same dollar. And so we need to make sure that we are communicating our knowledge, establishing our reputation as part of what you're doing in every in every form of every engagement. So a blog is very much a very important part of that. So using it to establish that you know what you're doing, you've got some interesting thinking that's behind what you're doing, illustrating it in different ways, and we'll get to that in a minute. But there's a whole lot of ways that you can think about communicating with people via a blog. It's not just about text, it's about text and pictures, it's about text that demonstrates that you are aware of the debates and the discussions in the broader marketplace, in your space, or in the broader not-for-profit space. So it's, there's a whole lot of ways that you can engage people with a blog. Now, it obviously also, I think, has a very, very important role, and you need to absolutely understand this, is that it sends Google and other search engines a lot of the right messages. And what are they? Well, we need to be able to have more content that is searchable. Google likes quality content, not just reposts of other people's content, but original content. And that search engines will rank you higher. Google obviously is the most imperative of all of them. So that it's important that it's fresh, and as I said before, it's non-static. It needs to be constantly new and a creation that you have done yourself. So it translates into being better ranked and for more keywords, which will give you a boost in terms of your organic search engine traffic, which is the most important one. So if someone's searching not-for-profits, childcare, not-for-profits, aid, not-for-profits, refugees, not-for-profits, women's services, or whatever it is, how are you going to elevate yourself up to the top of that search engine? And having a think about that, even enlisting some professional SEO support, if you've got the budget to do that, is a really good thing to think about. I would certainly advise people having a think about that if they are in the position to dedicate resources. So how does blogging translate to engagement? Really, so, we all agree that blogging is a really important thing in theory, but, how does it translate for you in practice into engagement? To simplify it, really, there are sort of three things, I think, that the blog reader, to translate the blog reader into a new stakeholder for you. So it's not just someone that visits your site and then goes. You need to translate them into a permanent engagement statistic. They're not just a statistic, they're more than that. As we said before, they're activated. They're activated to sign up to something. They're activated to click on a link. They're activated to give you money. They're activated to, sign up to a cause, sign up to an activity. And how do we do that? So let's have a think about that. As we've just said before, integrating the blog with the website is incredibly important. If the content you're providing is very valuable, then readers will be interested in the other content on your site as well. They also might be interested in subscribing to the blog via email. So it's really imperative that you always have a clear call to action for subscription to the blog. With all of the great content that you're producing, there's also bound to be some linking opportunities as well. So consider words and phrases that will relate to what you do or what you're offering. What are you asking them to sign up for? So from time to time, it's also good to use your blog for internal linking, but be sure that the linking is accurate. There's nothing more frustrating than clicking on a link and being told that site doesn't exist. It's, you get frustrated. You don't win brownie points with people. You need to get them clicking away and happily clicking away and connecting to things that are there. And the other thing to think about is is guest blogging. So either you guest blog for other people or you get people to guest blog for you, because those links are what Google and others want to see. They want to see more organic links from more sites to you and from you to others. The healthier that connections and those linkages are, the higher ranking that you get. So that's also very important. So don't disregard those. So if you've got the opportunity to do a guest blog for someone else or ask someone to do a guest blog for you, that's great. Make sure that you get that person to acknowledge that they've done a blog on their site or wherever they can. So if that might be their Twitter or their Facebook site, it might be on their own site, but it's obviously about trying to link back people back to you and encouraging that healthy, robust connections online. Calls to action. Now, we've all heard the term calls to action. So what does that mean? There's a whole range of things that we can do. We can have buttons that say learn more, subscribe, or donate here. It's important that those buttons are very prominent, they're well designed, and you need to perfect those buttons. I mean, some of the not-for-profits in the States, and I'll show you some of their blogs in a minute, but some of the not-for-profits in the States and indeed in Australia spend an amazing amount of time perfecting where those buttons are located on a site, where those call to actions are, what those call to actions are asking for, and the language in those call to actions. The colour and the buttons, the size of the buttons. There is a science behind this stuff, and it's really important that you get that right. Because if you get it right and people are clicking on those donate buttons or the subscribe buttons, you're increasing your subscriber base, you're increasing your income, you're increasing your engagement, you're increasing a group of people that you can call upon to do something for you. You're increasing the goodwill, you're increasing your notoriety and your reputation. So it's all positive. So, the other thing that you need to make sure that you factor in is at least try to get something from them when they connect to you. So hopefully they don't just go to you and go away. You want to reduce your bounce rate, not increase it. So you need to make those connections, increase the clickability, increase this, the amount of time that people will connect with those various call to actions that you make a decision on. So it may be that you get them to follow you on Twitter or, sign up for an email subscription or follow you on Facebook. Something is important. Something is better than nothing in terms of getting that integration happening. Now, Matt has asked me a question, interested in your thoughts on how to manage multiple contributions to an organisation's blog. Any tips for maintaining a consistent voice? Yeah, no, we're just going to get to voice and persona in a second, so just bear with me. And Patrick just has to leave. He said, will a recording be available? Yes, we'll be sending out the slides to everyone, and we'll also have a recording up on the 50 Acres TV YouTube site. So if you just search 50 Acres TV on YouTube, and also we'll send out the slides to everyone as well. So let's look at some examples before we move on to voice and persona. I've just cut and pasted a couple of front pages from various blogs. Some of you may have come across various people. This is a woman called Beth Cantor, who's actually in the United States. She's one of the US's, I suppose, strongest voices in this space. She actually spoke at a conference that I spoke at a couple of years ago, a Connecting Up conference in Queensland. She didn't wear the hat on that occasion, but she's a great advocate for the not-for-profit or non-profit space, as it's called in the States. Her blog is a great one to have a look at. I've got some resources at the end of this slide, so it's you don't have to write all these down. World Vision is a great. They have a blog on their site here in Australia and also overseas. They use a lot of strong imagery as you would expect on their blog. And, that's a really good way of grabbing hold of people, because for them it's about engendering an action. And, what better way of doing that than to show people, the people that they're helping, and the people that need help, which is what they are demonstrating here, obviously. Now, the Good magazine, it's a blog magazine for Good. Some of you may have come across it before. I love Good. It's good.is is the website. There's lots and lots and lots of really useful resources on this site. It's a one-stop shop for social good thinking, social good writing. There's a whole lot of stuff there. You'll certainly find something to interest you there, and also to have a look at some of the simple ways that they demonstrate information. They use infographics really well on Good, and I think it's well worth having a look at. One I'm sure that you all know is Pro Bono News. It's more of a news site, it's a news hub in some respects, but it's a blog really in many respects. They also have a lot of ads on the site, which if you're in a position to monetize your site, obviously that's a good place to have it. So depending on where your organisation is up to, looking at getting ads involved, I wouldn't dismiss that as an option. I would certainly be thinking about it. And you can monetize your site through various ways. You can do it yourself, or you can get various organisations who do that stuff professionally. So let's move on to persona and to voice. And obviously establishing a consistent voice in your blog, whether or not it's contributed to by one or many, it's really important for the brand of your organisation. So, before you start writing, you need to decide on what type of personas that you or users are going to have, and they're going to get from the users are going to get from your blog. Sometimes people want to have one tone of voice, and it's from the blog or from the organisation's point of view, which is absolutely perfectly legitimate and a perfectly reasonable way of doing it. The other way of doing it is to have a number of, if you have guest posts, to have them clearly labelled so people know that it's a personal point of view, and so that explains the different language that might be used or the different tone that people might be adopting. That's a perfectly reasonable way of doing it. But I think Matt's question is in terms of different writers of a blog. Obviously, an organisation has a number of people who write things. It's sometimes you'll have radically different writing styles. What's the best way of doing that? Really, I suppose in some respects, is to have one person editing it all. So you've got some sort of consistency in tone. That may not always be possible. So I suppose it's about trying to make sure that the tone is not radically different. And we'll get to that in a second. But, so someone's not very, brief and has sort of simple language, and then someone else uses a lot of jargon and makes their piece incredibly complicated. So it's about trying to have something that's similar. Different people have different writing styles. Some people are, amazing writers, and some people come to it, reluctantly. So, I suppose it's about trying to unify that voice, finding a happy place in the middle. So what is persona and voice in terms of a blog? Well, personas are the sort of the little picture, if you like, of the individual personalities of your blog or the authors. So the voice is a bigger thing than that. It's the overall tone, the style, and the message that the blog will take. They're both different in some respects, and I think, Matt, that answers your questions in some respects, because you can have different personas on a blog. People recognise that it's You're not producing a daily newspaper. You're producing something that's real. It reflects the human beings that work in your organisation. It doesn't have to be, amazingly scribed from an amazing author that, just sort of brings it to life in every sentence and in every word. What I do think it does have to be, it has to not have spelling mistakes. It has to be well edited, and it has to, look good on the page. I think people will respond to that better in some respects, and particularly if it's readable and understandable, than if there is obviously some differences in the persona in different pieces on the blog. You have to decide what you want to be known for. We talked a little bit before about reputation and establishing your knowledge. So you need to think about, when people turn around and look at you and talk about your blog, what do they want? What do you want them to know you for? What do they want? What do you want them to say? If there's group of people who are sitting in a coffee shop saying, well, I've just read some really cool blogs. This one's great because it does what? What do you want them to say about you if you, in an ideal world? You want them to know you for your great imagery. You want them to know you for the amazing case studies that you put there. Do you want them to know you for some incredibly consistent, academically rigorous work that you're using the blog to demonstrate? Do you want them to know you for information that you're providing to the sector that you're servicing? So there's different things that you may want to do, and you may want to do all of those things. And there's nothing wrong with doing more than one thing with a blog. It's just about making sure that when you do it, you do it well. And it's not a cacophony of sound, because I think, you can, if you look at, say, the Good blog or, any of those blogs that are sort of, that are demonstrating a whole lot of knowledge areas, they're doing different things all the time. There's different areas. There's different things that are coming forward. There's some academic research on one day. There's some infographics the next. There's a thought piece by someone the next. You can do all of those. I think the important thing is making sure that it's lucid, making sure that it's been edited, and making sure that it's illustrated well if you can. I think that's always useful. Always remember that you're writing for a really specific audience, not the whole world, because, you're not writing for, it's not the Guardian website, it's not the Sydney Morning Herald's website, it's not the ABC website. It's an audience that's going to come to talk to you about what you have got to say. And so I think you need to think about your personas that will match the people that are coming to you. So if it's an industry association, they obviously, are used to using various types of language and jargon. If it's another type of group that's maybe not, university educated to the same extent, then it might be a decision to use, different sorts of language on different occasions that is more appropriate for the audience. So it's about thinking about the personas and making sure that that voice and those personas appeal to the niche that you're targeting. That's really, really important. So the first step for writing for your audience. Okay, let's have a think about that. The first step to creating a successful blog that really resonates with your audience is identifying who the audience is. Now, it sounds really obvious, obviously. You think you know who they are. They're your members, they're your supporters, they're whoever. But actually, really, do you know who they are? Have a think about, some of these questions before you sit down to write. Who is your intended audience? Who are you speaking to? Are they predominantly male or are they female? A bit of both. Where are they? Are they all in one state? Are they all in one city? Are they all over the world? Are they just in your industry or your not-for-profit space? Or are they other people who might use your blog? as a resource tool, for example, school children, universities, etc., etc. So have a think about the different audiences that you might be writing for. Google Analytics is the easiest way to answer some of those questions. So if you haven't got Google Analytics set up on your website, go and do it this afternoon, is what I'd suggest. It's a free tool, and if you aren't able to set it up yourself, probably the person who created your website should be able to help you do that. But it's going to give you a really good understanding about where your audience comes from. It'll tell you where where your clicks have come from, how long they're staying there, where they've been directed to you from. Has it been organic search? Has it been links from somewhere else, etc., etc. It can tell you what languages they speak because it shows you if they're coming from other countries. It shows you what web browsers they use and how they interact with your website when they're there. So how long they're on the website for, how many pages they go to visit. I'm sure most of you are familiar with Google Analytics, but if you're not, it's really a very, very useful tool, and it's free. So, knowing obviously as much about your audience is very important. It's vital. So, once you've done that research, you need to keep your audience in mind at all times. So it's not just you writing something that just you think is a great idea. You need to think, will this work with the people who are going to read it? They should absolutely be at the forefront of your mind when you're developing your personas, when you're creating a voice, when you're brainstorming topics and writing the content. It's absolutely imperative. So it's all about providing value to them. So you need to understand what they want and use personas and a voice to give that to them, because that will obviously bring them back. And I'm sure some of you have gone to blogs. You might have gone to blog, on and off for a bit. You go to one and you go, actually, I don't like that last post, and you don't go there again, or you may not go there for a while. So you just need to try and keep them happy as much of the time as you possibly can. It's a hard ask, and it's not a perfect science, and it's not possible to do it for everyone all the time, obviously, but it's about constantly having that in the back of your mind when you are creating content. So keeping it simple. Obviously, you need to have a think about how you create that content. Now, you've all been on, I'm sure you've all gone to various websites and you've clicked on a story and it's been incredibly long and it's been very complicated and there's been lots of footnotes. And it's just, you look at it and it's just a page of dense writing and you go, really? And most of the time, people aren't really up for that unless they're doing some sort of really serious research. People aren't generally up for writing serious, heavy-duty stuff, I think, or reading heavy-duty stuff in a blog scenario. Sometimes they are, but I think by and large, keeping it, I think it needs to demonstrate the competency in your space. Obviously, you can't dumb it down too much because you need to obviously not alienate your audience, and you need to respect what they bring to the table for you and their intelligence and what they're contributing to the overall discussion. But you do need to be aware that each slang word that you do use might limit your audience, as in their understanding of what you've written. So, when I'm giving lectures or workshops on communications, I'll always say to people, write things in plain English. Write them so that the audience can just read it without thinking about it. Because, someone with a PhD can understand these words on the page that are here that you're looking at now. But not everyone can understand what a PhD, a PhD type of language. So if you're trying to embrace a broader audience, keep them with you, as long and as often as possible, I think the best thing to do is to keep your language as simple as possible and reduce those slang words, reduce the jargon. Sometimes it's appropriate when you're talking about technical things and you're talking about a new development in a sector or a new development in a space. It's obviously important. You may need to reference what that is, just so that you're assuming that there are people who will land on your site who may not be in your sector, who may not know what those words are. So you either explain them in a footnote if they're very technical, or you might link to something else to actually explain what that word is. I think about doing those sorts of techniques so as to make sure that you are inclusive of all readers, even the readers who have no prior knowledge of what you're writing about. As we know, attention spans are shrinking. It's one of the things that I always quote is a piece by Walid Ali, who I'm sure you all know. Walid himself is not on social media, but he writes a lot in his role as an academic about social media. I think for his own mental health, he's probably decided to go off it. But if you look on Twitter, someone has taken Walid Ali's Twitter handle and it says, Walid, this is your Twitter handle. When you're ready for it, I'll happily hand it over. But Walid writes very intelligently about social media and about how it's sort of descended upon us without us even really signing up for it. It's just here. It's all around us. And the first iPhone came on the market the year Kevin Rudd was elected, which isn't all that long ago. And, if you can think about your life pre-having a smartphone, it's sort of hard to do. I mean, I do recall living in a world where we had fax machines and, we didn't have smartphones. But really, your life is in very, very great extent now governed by social media. And the attention spans are shrinking. And so I think the amount of content online is growing incredibly rapidly. It's taking over, most of our thinking space. How often do you answer a question from your child or a friend about something and you go, hang on, I'll just Google that? Because there's an enormous power that we all have at the touch of a button or at the end of our fingertips to try and find that information. But as a consequence, I think the attention spans are reducing. And so you need to make sure that you don't waste words just for the heck of it. Yes, you can, it is absolutely the case that slightly longer posts, 200, 300, 400 word posts are good for Google Analytics. That's absolutely the case. It's what my SEO company that we have retained advises us, and they're pretty good in terms of what they know and in the market. That's not to say that you want to put up 1,000-word pieces every week, but because I think people would just be drowned by the love of the words. So I think you need to have a good balance of some shorter pieces, some longer pieces, and some pieces which are accompanied by some strong images, some pieces that might have some video attached to them, thinking about mixing it up. But I think the simplicity is absolutely key. I think it's important to separate the paragraphs, and you can use lists and subheadings. Think about yourself when you're reading a newspaper or you're reading an online newsline, a news hub. Separating that content out, I think, is helpful. Using short paragraphs and shorter sentences, I think, is helpful. Getting to the point quickly and avoiding fluff in terms of the content, just additional verbiage that just takes up space for no reason, I think, is absolutely imperative. Don't just plonk extra content in there because you can, because that's when you'll lose readers. People will switch off because they'll know that at the click of a button or another screen, they've got something that's more tantalizing and more interesting, whether that's just a game on their iPhone or whether it's something else. You need to keep them engaged and with you, not lose them, obviously. So you need to highlight your value, and we talked about that right at the beginning. And how do you do that? So I think you need to do that in a couple of ways. You need to have, what I'd call a value proposition. And again, we've talked about, what sets you apart from similar blogs or businesses or organizations. What is it that you do well? What is it that you are trying to get people to sign up for, to be engaged with, to commit to? What is it that you're doing better than the other guys? There's a whole lot of organizations out there that are competing for time, money, and effort. Matt's just asking another question, sorry. So I'm just having a look at what you've said, Matt. Matt makes the point, read plain English. There's research that even highly educated people prefer straightforward writing. The Public Speaks, an empirical study of legal communication by Christopher Trudeau, which is Trudeau. We'll put that in an email for people when we send out the slides a bit later today, but that's great. Thanks. I always say plain English. People always, what is plain English? I think it's English that kids can understand. Really, if you think about, I was at a public speaking competition in my kids' school this week. I got a bunch of 10-year-olds got up and spoke, and they spoke really simply, and they spoke from the heart. And they speak in plain English. We should be able to speak in a way that 10, 11, 12-year-olds understand. Sometimes the jargon needs to come in and be used, but I think most of the time you can probably speak in plain English, and it will really serve you well in many respects. So let's getting back to the value proposition. What sets you apart from similar blogs? It's incredibly competitive. There are organisations that are competing for the dollars in various spaces. Look at the aid space, look at the refugee space, look at the children's services space, the women's organisation space. People are out there competing for, the Indigenous space. People are out there competing for money from one another. They're competing for engagement, and you need to make sure that you can stand up and people can say, those guys do this really well, and they remember you for doing whatever it is you do, and that it's conveyed through your blog. That's how you do it. That's what I think people will remember you for, and you'll proliferate that engagement. That engagement will snowball as a consequence, which is obviously what you're after. You need to have opinions. Obviously, they shouldn't be trite or arrogant, because people see that. People know when you're arrogant. They don't like it. But having a strength of conviction is important, because people want you to have a view. People who are involved with causes and doing things in the not-for-profit space have a view. Broadly speaking, they want to do something. They're involved because they are committed to a cause. They're committed to an action. They're wanting to help improve people's lives, improve a group of people or a particular area of people or a geographical area or whatever it is. They do stuff. So they're used to people having opinions, and I think you need to show that you have an opinion as well. But I would, say being arrogant is obviously taking it too far. But that's not to say you can't have a guest blogger that comes online and does have a strength of opinion. We all enjoy reading, strong vocal advocates from time to time. You probably don't want someone screaming at you through a blog, but having some strong advocates with a strong voice is fantastic, I think. And you can also assess what sort of response those other people or that sort of strength of opinion gets you. See what the feedback is in the comments. See what the reposts are. See what the shares are on Twitter and Facebook. When a particular author or a particular viewpoint or a voice works, do it again. Replicate it. Not obviously the same text, but the same sort of voice, the same sort of attitude. Do it again if it works. The analytics should tell you all of that. You also need to demonstrate your strengths, and how can you do that? Now, as we talked about before, having acres of turgid text that just sort of confronts you when you click onto a blog, I don't think is the answer. You can highlight your strengths in a range of ways, but I think either through, as we've said, some guest posts, some stronger authors that you've got either within your organisation or from outside it, or showing it through some stunning images, either that you have got yourself, you've commissioned someone to do, perhaps you might get your members to do it. I'm working with an organisation at the moment, and we're going to get some of, they work a lot in the disability space, and they're going to get some of the people that they work with, some of their clients, to have a photographic exhibition, I think, and we're looking to use that online and in a blog and in different formats. So have a think about how you can get the people who are already committed to what you're doing, people who've got the energy and the drive, and they're there with you already. What can they bring to the table? What can you get them to contribute? Because if they are seeing their own images on a blog, they're surely going to be connecting and reading it, and they will send other people to the blog as well. So, increasing your family of connections is a great way of doing that, and there's more than one way of doing that. Obviously, when I'm talking about images, you need to be aware that you obviously need to get permission to use images. You need to you can't just sort of use someone's photo without seeking their permission, and crediting them is obviously a good thing to do as well. That speaks from someone whose husband is a photographer, and he gets very, very uptight when he sees his photos on various blogs, which I won't mention the name of, but many of you probably know of them, and people get very frustrated about their photos being used. So we're now at the end of the webinar. I've got some resources here for you. If anyone's got any other questions, please jot them in now. I've got some resources here that I've just sort of dumped here in a slide, and don't hesitate to ask us any questions via email when we send out the slides. There is a plethora of resources out there for on blogs. There's a site called the Top Nonprofit Blogs, or Top Nonprofits in the States, and they've got a list of nonprofit blogs, which is pretty cool. And obviously they're in the States, but they do this stuff really well there. It's an incredibly competitive market over there, and so if you are looking for inspiration, either in terms of creating something, from imagery, how you're structuring something, have a look around the space before you decide on a particular structure. As I mentioned before, the Good magazine, I think, is a really good thing to have a look at. Conscious magazine is a new entrant to the space, which has just come on market in the last couple of months, consciousmagazine.co. I really like them, and I've been in discussion with them about the work that they're doing potentially in Australia. And they've got a good online blog. Pro Bono Australia is a great site, a great resource, not just for the information and the news, but also a whole lot of other stuff there. You'll get all sorts of resources, links to other events, all sorts of different stuff. I think is a really useful site to have a look at. Connectingup.org, I don't know whether any of you know it, but it's a organisation that started from perspective of servicing people with IT needs, and it's now very much developed into an organisation that is a connector of people in the not-for-profit space in terms of information. And they have an annual conference, which is actually in Adelaide next week, which I'll be at and speaking at with Nick Lee from the Jodie Lee Foundation. And it's a great conference, but they have their own blog as well as a site full of information, and I would urge you to go and have a look at that. It's a great site. AusA is the organisation, it's the peak body of organisation executives, so the CEOs of not-for-profits and other organisations. They have their own blog section on their site. AusA is also a great site for resources for the sector. I would absolutely suggest that you go and have a look at that if you haven't. This recording will be available on our 50 Acres TV YouTube site, so just search 50 Acres TV, and we'll also email you the slide pack at the end of today. And thanks so much for joining us. We very much appreciate you being with us to share in some thinking about the not-for-profit world, which is what we do from time to time. We'll certainly let you know about the next one. In the meantime, have a great day and a great week, and thanks again for joining us.